Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood collaboration with OK&Y Podcast. This is the Spark of Mediocrity. This is the last set of videos here that we're doing for the series. So this is the Deck Tech series. So we are going to be deck teching the Iyslander and the Fai, which is what Rob and myself were playing in that series. This is supposed to be kind of the cap off the series, whereas the last discussion video talked about like our experience with the game, the games we played, differences between the version 1, version 2, what we liked, what we didn't, like more specific to like the testing of the deck to bring us to this particular deck, so you can see
Mhm.
like the full process of what our thoughts are going into this deck. This video is more just talking about what the deck is supposed to do, how it works, what we think the matchups are, maybe where we think it's going to be in the meta, a little bit like that here. But it's mainly about the deck itself, not really about the process about how this deck came to be. If you want to see that process, we have a ton of other videos. Just watch the entire series, and you'll get from first to end, and you see where how we got here, and you can replicate that process. If you're a newer intermediate player, or maybe you just haven't built a deck before, maybe you were just kind of content with more the net decking style and just want to be a pilot, but maybe Uprising is where you're going to be a Phoenix reborn and you're going to make your own decks and come onto the road to that scene and smush some fools, right? So with that, the only thing I want to mention is we do have that Toronto doubleheader event coming in Anime North. Very excited for that. We have some special prizes. I know Adam Forest City Cohen's
Mhm.
he's been showing us on some picks. We're not going to spoil anything, but there's going to be some special stuff on auction, special stuff for Battle Hardened, special stuff for Rhodes that aren't. They're definitely extra. I'm not going to spoil anything, but they look
Yeah.
nuts.
You got a lot of support from a lot of LGSs from
We got
distribution
a
and from
lot of
LSS as well, so it'll be very,
we
very
got
spicy.
a ton of really nice stuff here. I will be playing most likely in the Road to Nats and then co-casting with Rob on Sunday for the Battle Hardened.
Right.
So be sure to check that out, as well as we'll have our panel from 1 to 2 if you are there. Check us out. I mean, you don't have to stay for the whole thing. You can stay for a little Jeopardy, a little bit at the beginning. We'll be giving prizes throughout the whole thing. Spark of Genius mats, non-Spark of Genius mat, EA Heralds, Rainbow Foil, Cold Foil, you name it. We're gonna have stuff.
Mhm.
Mainly because we don't have to ship it. So when we give it to you guys, like we know you actually, we know you're gonna get it. We don't have to screw with all the mail and
It's true.
it not showing up,
It's
which
true.
does happen. So I think with that, I think we can kind of start it off here. So Rob's gonna lead off with his Iyslander V2.
Yeah. Actually, it should probably be like V3 at this point. But anyway,
Probably
yeah, we've
run me
both
through run
played
me through the deck.
Iyslander and Fai, and through the process, this deck has changed quite a bit. I've learned a lot through the process of playing this hero. I'm not a wizard player, so a lot of the interactions with like the
Big
instants and
disclaimer.
just a lot of things that kind of chain onto themselves, or I guess onto each other on the opponent's turn, is just like in my mind completely new. So I learned a lot. So let's start with the equipments in this deck. So the only weapon I'm running is Waning Moon. I have tossed to the side the Aether Vein. I don't think it's that
Why
useful.
is that?
It doesn't really synergize with the deck's goal, and the deck's
Mm-hmm.
goal is to be consistently chipping on the opponent's turn while creating frostbites. So with her ability, and then I noticed that the one arcane damage is not substantial enough to really get the chip damage, and because there is an additional, like on hit with the Aether Vein, the opponent's much more keen to block it. So
Yep.
I much prefer using Waning Moon for 2. It's an extra 2 damage for an extra resource. So very, very, I guess the value there is very good for Waning Moon. So yeah, chipping away at
Mm-hmm.
the opponent's turn, and then on your turn, being as disruptive as you possibly can, or
Mm-hmm.
being as damaging as you possibly can with some of the
Depending on
combos
the
that are in
deck,
this
right?
deck.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, Waning Moon's the only weapon we're gonna run. Alluvian, Constellas, and the Fyandel Spring Tunic are the only chest pieces. The Alluvian is only into the mirror pretty much, and the Tunic is into everything else. The one resource goes really well with some of the one costed cards we have in the deck. Plus, if you have a 4 cost combo, the Tunic also helps get that off. The
Yep.
Coronet Peak is the only helmet we run. 2 block is great. It's kind of on par with the Skull Cap in that sense, but on your own turn, if you don't have anything really to play that's as disruptive, you can pitch 3 for Coronet Peak, and you get your disruption in that way. So it's pretty good. There's a lot of blue in the deck, so you
Mm-hmm.
always have something to pitch for that. The 2 gloves we have, um, I guess I can bring this back in here. The Conduit of Frostburn and the Metacarpus Node. So Conduit of Frostburn is there to be more disruptive. It lets you pop a frozen card from the arsenal, and the Metacarpus Node is when you're trying to get off your finishers. If you're if you're in a more control game where you can have the space to be able to get a huge Metacarpus turn off. That's kind of where I draw the line between the two. The Conduit of Frostburn is probably played like maybe a quarter to a fifth of the time, in my opinion, because Metacarpus Node is just so good for finishing off games. But it's a cool little trick you can do with the Conduit. You can freeze your card on your turn. So your turn, you play something to freeze your opponent's arsenal, and then on their turn, you pop the Conduit, then deal a bit of arcane damage, and it just breaks their arsenal. So it's kind of fun. It's like a little built-in CNC there. The only boots, of course, will be Storm Striders. There's nothing else that you can play in this hero. I don't think I've even seen another option anywhere.
No, I think it's like not as explosive as what Kano does with it, but the fact of the matter is like you can get one card out of Arsenal as an instant. That's fine. You can get Waning Moon as an instant if that card's a non-attack, right? But like, how do you get the third thing? How do you get the third thing off, right? There's not really any other cards that come in as instant. There are some, but like. You flip them off the top with Kano, which you can't do in this deck.
Yeah,
right?
and there are quite a few powerful red cards in this deck as well that you can't play as instants from the arsenal. So Storm Striders really comes in there for the finisher if you can get it off. There are some cards that can deal up to, like, as we've seen, up to 10 damage with a single card. So Storm Striders is really good.
Maybe you like Striders out like Stir or something like that to like be able to go even wider, but like that's a different type of deck, I think. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's more akin to Kano's playstyle. This deck is very much slower. It's not as explosive.
It's on the mid-sized. Yeah, it's definitely not control. That's for sure.
Right.
But it's
we've established that with the lower health total, the no armor. This is not a control deck. This is mainly mid-range, and mid-range disruption is the right way to put it. Okay, so let's go at the look at the main. Let's look at the main deck a little bit here. Yeah, so there's a lot of cards that I kind of call the disruption cards.
Which ones are? Give me the staples.
Yeah, the staples are pretty much the ice bolts. You run all the blues, all the reds. There are no yellow cards in this deck, which is interesting.
They're not
the
very
yellows
good.
are very like they're always in between, but in this deck it feels especially in between because the blues actually serve a purpose. And the reds are just much more damage or more damage.
The blues, I think the blues are just king in Iyslander, right?
Yeah,
because it's like you want to run a lot of blues, get them out of arsenal. You want to be able to always have pitch. Like I think you always want 3 blues in your hand at like almost every single
1 red,
time.
3 blues. You want the blue to arsenal on your opponent's turn, be able to play it. You usually want to pitch a blue to play the card in the Waning Moon. And then on your turn, you want to play 1 single ice card, maybe fuse with it, and then have 1 blue card left over to arsenal.
Yeah, like an ice spine or an encase, you have it, and then you have like the blue ice bolt, you fuse it with it in your arsenal. That's like the ideal turn cycle, I think.
Yeah, and having lots of blues really helps facilitate that playstyle. So Ice Bolt being one of the main bread and butter cards. Ice Bind, an excellent card, 0 for 3. There are a few 0 for 3s, mainly Ice Bind and an Encase, which I put here in the sideboard. So those are the 2 0 for 3s that have a very good disruptive effect. I'm running all 6 Arctic Incarcerations. I say all, I mean all blue and all red. The blues are really good.
The ones you want.
Exactly. The blues are very good for playing on the opponent's turn for 2 Frostbites for free, and the red one on your own turn gives them 3 Frostbites. So they're very good, very disruptive. So yeah, they weren't in the original deck, but I slided them in because they're really good. And we also have Blizzard, Channel Lake Frigid, and Channel the Bleak Expanse. Just 3 really good blue ice cards that just synergize with everything in the deck. All disruptive, all blue, all ice. Yeah. So enough said.
All day.
Also, Blizzard being able to give an opponent a Frostbite as well on their own turn, even though you're not playing it from Arsenal, something I learned from one of my games.
Many a Frostbite has been missed by this interaction on the prop.
So instant ice cards will give the Frostbites as well, which is awesome.
As long as they're ice, and as long as on their turn, Iyslander will proc. And Iyslander doesn't say once per turn, or there's no cap on that Frostbite ability.
Exactly, yeah. Frost Hex being one of those cards that I include in the main package. I was thinking of sideboarding it, but Frost Hex, because it's a blue that blocks for 3, you pretty much want to keep it. And you might find a time to slide it in.
It's an ice card too.
It's also ice, yeah. So it synergizes with everything. Even though the ability isn't as useful, I believe, into aggro, it's still a card that I'm not going to side out. It's just too good. So 3 copies running in pretty much every matchup. Ice Eternal, of course, being one of your main finishers, or one of your main disruption cards that also deals damage. So it's really good. And yeah, I think there are a few 1-costed cards like Cold Snap, very good to play from the arsenal.
I really like Cold Snap with the Tunic synergy, right? Like paying with the Tunic, getting the Cold Snap out,
gives you a 5-card hand.
You give them a Frostbite on their turn. It's already good, right? Get the 5-card hand.
100%.
Maybe you can win. Maybe like that extra blue or that extra combo card could lead to like a win. And I think using that Tunic resource is very efficient that way. So having a couple like nice 1 costs that maybe you didn't really need the extra resource to like hit with the Waning Moon. Like if you're hitting them with Polar Cap, you only have 1 left over for the Waning Moon. So you can use Tunic and then pitch to be able to, get through a Polar Cap and a Waning Moon.
Yeah, they're exactly. Some of the 2-costed cards, like the Ice Bolt specifically and Polar Cap, they go really well into Waning Moon if you have the Tunic up.
With a blue. Resources. With a blue. Yeah, with a blue. Like it's just like if you need to block, which you will need to block into aggro eventually, right? So you will block with a card and you only have 3 pitch. That's kind of the other place to Tunic, but I also really like with that Cold Snap. Channel Bleak also costs 1, I believe.
It does, exactly.
Very,
Cold Snap, very good Channel Bleaks. Uses. And the Aether Hails as well. I'm only running 2 of the red Aether Hails. I had to cut something because I had way too many things, and the reds were not as great as the blue ones, so I took out 1. And
I agree. I like the blue ones for sure.
Ice Bolt kind of outvalues it a bit, 2 for 5. All right, so that's the main deck. I forgot to mention Emeritus Scolding, another 2-cost card, which pairs really well with
good damage.
It's just 4 damage for 2, and it's a blue, blocks for 3. Excellent card. Okay. Let's look at the sideboard.
I guess the cards in the sideboard. I guess whoever's like, if you want it, because this deck is currently at 1, 2, 3, 4, so 7 cards. So you're at 53 cards as far as the main deck. So at the moment, you'd be adding 7 cards from the sideboard into your main deck.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 18. There's actually 20 cards in here, so it's 53. You're right. Sorry, that's what you said. 53. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or I'll just straight up ignoring me and double checking.
I thought you said 57. I was like, that didn't sound right.
No. 7 cards in this side list to put into, and I think it really depends on what you're going against.
There are a few packages here in this.
I see you add the red Singe in there.
Yeah, this is from my lesson playing against Dromai. So against Dromai, you do want to play the Singes because it can destroy up to 3 of their little wyvern things when you play their wyverns, whatever they're called, little ash dragons, because those things get out of hand. There's no way for you to like destroy them.
Aether Ashwings.
Ashwings, that was it. So Singed being a very key card against Dromai. Also into Dromai, we play the Icy Encounters just to have ice cards that also hit for 6 to pop exactly. The poppers. Hypothermia is one of those cards that isn't great into heroes that already have built-in go again on their attacks. So if there are heroes that like to gain go again by other means, this card is amazing. So I guess Luminaris, it's also more like Prism hate. So this will prevent attacks from gaining go again.
Shove that in on Prism for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's also a blue. So this is the one I'm probably more keen to put in if I'm like not as sure. Like this is one of the cards that's probably just going to jump into my deck. Sigil of Permafrost, a card that I didn't have initially. It's very good into, first of all, getting the 4 block, and second of all, synergizing with the instant you play on the opponent's turn to give extra frostbites. So you would basically, if they attack you, you would Sigil of Permafrost, block 4. Then it says the next card that deals arcane damage will also give that many frostbites for how much damage you give. So you can block with that, have 2 left over. You can play a blue from Arsenal like, Ice Bolt that deals 3. If they don't block it, gives them 3 frostbites. Also, if your Arsenal card is not even arcane damaging, like let's say it's like a Winter's Bite or something, play it and then you can Waning Moon for 3 with your leftover 2 resources.
On their turn.
And that'll still give them the frostbites. So it's actually a pretty good card. I underestimated it quite a bit. I think it has a place against most aggressive decks that deal 4 damage in a single attack action card.
Yep. I think it's also like very good synergy with Tunic again. Cost 1.
That's true. You can Tunic it. Yep. Right. Precisely.
You can Tunic it. Remember to never Arsenal this card if you can. This card is way better from hand. You generally don't want to. You want to be arsenaling that ice blue.
You basically, if it is in the arsenal, you basically have to then use your Storm Striders to get something out. It's like
it's not really.
You don't really want to be doing that.
Yeah, I think people are definitely going to forget on the early days that this is not a non-attack action, and they're going to try to Waiting Moon after this without playing
Yeah,
one. I 100% think that's going to be happening in a lot of people's games.
yeah,
So something that's like very easy to do is you could pitch a blue. Let's say you don't have Tunic up, right? Or if you do have Tunic up, so you pitch a blue for the Sigil, and then you have like Aether Hail from Arsenal, right?
right.
So Aether Hill, the blue one only costs one. So then you have one floating, and then you can have a Tunic counter, and then pay Waiting Moon with a Tunic counter. That if you only have a blue, because let's say if you're sigilling, maybe you're blocking a little bit more. So you block with a 3 block, block the sigil, you block it for 7, come back and give them some frostbites. If you do it on the very first attack, those frostbites might finish their turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they can't, maybe they either can't pay to get rid of the rest of the frostbites on their next attacks, right? For the sigil, and if they've already done their job, or they sit on it and pass. Either way, you've done your job. And if they have a frost hack on their side
Mm-hmm.
of the board, then they have to make that decision if they want to take the damage. So
Yeah,
I think Sigil Permafrost really does well with the frost by synergy, which is one of the ways that
right.
Iyslander can chip through
Yeah.
the opponent's
And one
health.
thing that just kind of dawned on me, I never got this combo off in a game, but Sigil of Permafrost, giving extra frostbites, and then using Stormstriders to freezing point, that seems like it's extra frostbites that'll buff the freezing points. If you're already going into, like, actually, I'll talk about Encase first, since that kind of leans into the combo. So Encase being a card that can freeze the hero and all their equipments that they control, which gives you like fodder for being able to increase the damage of freezing point, because freezing point deals X more damage, which is equal to the number of frozen cards or afflictions or frostbites, everything together. So you would play Encase on your own turn, and then on the opponent's turn, you would have frozen 5 cards, their hero plus 4 equipments, assuming they have 4 equipments up. And then you would Storm Striders out freezing point. Or I guess you can play something from Arsenal first, give them a few more frostbites, and then freezing point on your Storm Striders.
If you have enough blues, right? Like that's the key managing, because freezing point does cost 3, so it is the most expensive card in your deck in red.
Right.
Of course, you have blues that the frost hex costs 3, but frost hex is not really like one of those game-winning cards on the spot, but freezing point can be.
Right. Freezing point is probably the biggest
notice.
hitting card in the deck. So that and Encase pose a very strong combo that you run them as a package pretty much into more control decks.
Especially if decks are not running Arcane Barrier and not respecting.
Right.
Maybe they think Kano's gone. Maybe because the Iyslander and Prism and all these decks are still a thing, and they were good into Kano, and now they're just going to like rise up and be like, oh well, Oasis Respite and these other cards now just give like Kano's gonna have a rough time. Put it that way. If people are actually prepared, Kano's gonna have a really rough time. So maybe they just like, okay, well, Kano's not a thing anymore. They don't run a lot of Arcane Barrier. They're all running Arcane Barrier 1 or 2. It's like, well, you could get demolished by this card. Like you don't have that much life. Like mid to late game, like that 14. You don't need Blazing Aether to like finish the game. If you have 14 Arcane and they're on 12 and they have Arcane Barrier 2. You win on their turn still. Striders is still Striders. So I think people might get a little. I think Icelanders can get some cheeky wins off, like people unprepared for these kinds of combos. And so that's it. Talk to me a little bit about Weathervane. I haven't seen that card in many lists.
Yeah, Weathervane is a card that is actually so it's a 1 for 4 frostbites. So it's on the same kind of curve as Arctic Incarceration.
Has Go Again, which is nice.
That's one of the only cards that has Go Again, which is why I like it. If it was just 1 for 4 that deals, I mean, it's still pretty good to get 4 frostbites, but the Go Again is really nice because you can actually play this and then play a card that deals arcane damage. I mean, you have to, because you have to deal, you have to actually fuse to give the frostbites. That's the condition for the Weathervane. So you'd pitch a blue, play it, and then you can play into one of your disruptive cards like Polar Cap, Aether Ice Vein. You have Icebind or Encase. As long as you fuse, you get 4 frostbites.
And then you Striders into freezing point.
Yeah, it's another opener for freezing point as well. So you can play all of them. The thing is, like, you don't want to run too many red cards either, which is a bit of a problem with this deck. Or I guess with Iyslander in general, you can't play a lot of red cards. So you gotta make sure not to put too many things in, because you'll notice that I think most of my sideboard is red. I'm running almost every blue except for Hypothermia. It's just what red package do you want to add into this deck, really?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the deck.
Talk to me. I know me and you already went through a couple of the like more common lines that you can do with this deck, but talk to me a little bit about like where do you see Iyslander in the meta, like using this kind of deck, like a mid-rangey kind of poking with Waning Moon. Like you're not really combo control. You're not running a bunch of D reacts and like sitting on like which I am going to try to build and play on the channel. I have this idea tinkering in my head for like combo control Iyslander that
Mm.
like really goes like D-react. Like I'm going to play Absorb the Aether, I'm going to play Oasis, I'm going to play Sigils, I'm going to like try to actually control down the 15 D-reacts, try to keep poking, maybe I'll run the Krakens, and I have some ideas. Maybe it's
Mm.
garbage, but I'm going to
Mm.
try it. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that sounds
Anyways, my
very
point is
interesting.
that for like, I feel like most decks people are going to bring are more similar to this one. I think like these are the better bases. This is the more obvious kind of build that like. How do you think this is in the meta currently? What do you think?
Yeah, so the deck is an interesting is in an interesting spot where you can give frostbites, but you're not a control deck. So like, what does that mean, really? Right? Like you're disruptive, but you're not control. So
In
um,
this iteration, I should remind viewers that in this
yes, I'm
iteration, you're
sorry.
not going
Yeah.
control. You
And
can
the
build
deck is
like
still
people are going to
fairly
be like,
new.
yeah,
Icelander's been out for
yeah,
a while, but with these cards, she's just kind of
not
changed
this kind of
completely.
Iyslander.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So she's super two toned. It's like on your opponent's turn, you're being disruptive, and on your turn, you're putting out damage, and or being disruptive. So I think that
hmm
she has a very good match into aggro. You can side properly to be able to block out effectively and just kind of mitigate damage as much as possible, and
yeah,
then save up for like one big finisher if you can. I
yeah.
think
Just chip
that
through. Yeah.
yeah, of course you can chip through, and that's the main goal. You're just kind of blocking, and then you're giving one frostbite or two, which is enough to just completely block out or completely I guess stifle an aggro deck's turn.
hmm Yep.
So against aggro, she has a pretty good chance. She struggles
Yep.
into control, I think,
Yeah. That's
because you
fair.
have so many blue cards in this deck that aren't that powerful. Control is just easily going to be blocking you out.
They're
So
gonna run
against
Arcane Barrier.
control,
Yeah.
and they'll run arcane barrier. So against control, you do have to play more of the red package. I think you want to be more aggressive, and you want to run like all the combos that can get through the arcane barrier. The mountain of defense that I guess Oldhim can muster up, and decks like that. So you'd run a lot of the red cards in those matchups, but it is a struggle for sure. Um,
hmm
into mid
Yeah.
range, I guess she struggles a bit, but it's fair. It's not that bad. So aggro and mid range
Yeah.
is where this deck can do quite well. Um,
hmm
yeah, I think that's pretty much where she stands.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I think she like her biggest struggle is going to be Ultimate Prism, right? Like that,
Mm,
and Dromai to a lesser extent. You've added the Sinjin here, but I think Dromai can
yeah,
still
Dromai
present.
can still run over you. Like if you
Yeah.
can't get
Um,
rid of the dragons, it's over. And a lot of the
yeah.
ice
I
cards
see.
too don't actually target allies. Some maybe not
Which
all
she's
of them, but
also.
some of them were like
Yeah.
only target hero. So you can't
I
actually
think.
destroy dragons that easily.
Yeah. I think with the poppers and the Singe, you've definitely like got yourself a better Dromai matchup. I think it's
Yeah.
also like a matter of Dromai runs a shit ton of reds at the moment. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the builds I've been seeing, a lot of reds. And so that disruption with the even when they run flame scale and stuff like that, if they
Mm-hmm.
have a couple frostbites or you pop one of their dragons, I think you can do some pretty serious damage, especially if they're not on a lot of arcane, which I don't know if their lists have much space for arcane.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I think Prism and Oldhim are still extremely difficult, and to a lesser extent, Bravo is also going to be like, again, he's Bravo can be more mid range, but like Anothos is still a pain in the ass, and they're going to run Arcane Barrier 3, so you're going to have a tough time getting most of your stuff through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The
they
good
have
thing
healing and stuff
is,
like that.
right. The good news is that you are able to operate on a 2 card hand pretty well. As
Yep.
long as you like zero cost fuse and arsenal, like it's not that bad. You still have stuff
Yep.
to do, but it's still rough. It's still rough. All
Yeah.
right,
No,
want
I
to
totally agree.
transition on to Fai
Yep.
now, right?
Let's transition on to Phi.
Let's
So this
pull up
is
your
the
list.
Phi Spark of Genius. So I think there were a couple changes. Again, you can see the discussion for exactly my rationale for those changes, how they did in games, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this deck is a draconic based Phi deck. And I know a lot of people been talking about like, can you run Kodachis? Can you run a more rupture based deck with like you don't care about draconic chain links, you really just care about like getting to chain link 4 on rupture.
Mm-hmm.
Having 2 Kodachis gives you chain link 1, chain link 2, right? As opposed to Searing Emberblade, which also costs 2, but it's 1 attack, 1 chain link.
Yeah.
Gaining go again only if you've played a draconic, right? Whereas if you pitch a blue 0 cost, you gain the go again off Kodachis. I
Right.
think draconic has a higher ceiling than rupture. I think there is a rupture based list. The rupture cards I don't know if there are enough of them to really make me want to play a rupture based build with the Kodachi, so I chose to go with the draconic build style only because I want to like learn more. I think draconic is better for learning the deck first of all,
Mm-hmm.
learning how Phi works. I think draconic is just better. when I played sealed and the draft limited in Fai, it was just much easier to learn with Draconic. So running the Emberblade here, chest piece here, I'm running the Tunic in the main, and I'm running Flame Scale in the side. The Tunic is good because like one pitch is really good for things like Art of War. It's good for a lot of. I have a lot of one costs in the deck, one for fours. It's not uncommon. Even Flame Call Awakening, same idea. So the Tunic is very, very handy. Some of the matchups like the aggro decks and the mirror, I would bring in Flame Scale. If you check out our 5 vs Briar video, you can see exactly why I bring in Flame Scale. It's just 3 armor, right? It's 2 temper, so you're gonna get a 2 and a 1 off of it, and the effect might be relevant if you draw all reds, kind of thing. So I run the Furnace mainly because you're probably like, if I don't think I'm gonna get to 6 turns to get 2 pips off the Tunic, I think this Furnace is always better in most scenarios, unless you're against arcane damage. Whereas like if you're against, a deck where you don't need the armor, then yeah, Tunic's great. But into those hyper aggro mirrors like Briar, Fai, stuff like that, I think Furnace is just better. Even Guardian, I think Furnace might also be better just to give you more armor on like a big dominated attack or something like that.
Right.
Whereas against maybe Oldhim, you're going to run Tunic. Against Bravo, probably going to run Furnace. So I think both of them give you a lot of good flexibility. Mask, I'm only running Mask. I don't know.
No
it's
other
just
options,
so nice.
really.
Mask creates so much tempo off like being able to like swing a Phoenix Flame for 1, and they're like, oh shit, I got to block for 1 just to like.
I remember you
block
threatened the mask hit like twice in one turn.
I threatened a mask hit twice, and like you couldn't hit the second. Yeah, you couldn't block the second one, but like this deck can go wide. So I like that. Scalers in the boot slot. I've seen some people running Breeze Riders. Maybe it's better, maybe it's not. Scalers just to give the unconditional go again, which has come into play with some of the rupture cards that don't have go again. I could possibly switch to Breeze Riders for that extra armor. It's literally just a pip of armor. It doesn't like, you don't have combo cards, so it doesn't do anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Stubby Hammers, very explosive, and I think Stubby Hammers is one of those cards that within 3 turns, within 2 turns sometimes, you can get +4 off this, off 4 different attacks. And check out our gameplay for one of those also.
Yep.
In the aggro mirror, you are going to want Stubbies. The reason you're going to want Stubbies is that explosive burst of power. This deck runs a lot of 3 and below. We run Belittles, Flame Calls, and Flames, Phoenix Forms. Like a lot of cards are 3 base and below. So Stubbies has a ton of Spreading Flames, a ton of targets for this card. Very, very good. Tiger Stripe. Tiger Stripe is your other arm piece. It'll come in versus the longer matchups. So control, mid-range, like that Bravo kind of thing. The longer game, Shuko, you can get better value, right? Because you do run 2 costs and below, like all your Phoenix Flames. If you play 2 Phoenix Flames in a turn, you'll auto get Shuko. Inflame is another one that's lower than 2. Some of your blues, obviously. So I think Shuko goes in the list. The sideboard is Flipper's Null. I run Arcane Barrier 2 at the moment. Remains to be seen whether I need to run Arcane Barrier and I can just try to race against something like Iyslander. I think it was necessary when I played Iyslander and any kind of Arcane. I think if I didn't have it, I was dead in the water. Just because there are turns that they stonewall you, that you get bad resources and you get Frostbites to just finish your turn. So, I think I have Arcane right now. This is V2 or V3, so who knows if that's correct. Depends on the meta, right? This runs the Belittle package, so 3 red Belittles and 1 blue Minnowism. V1 had 3 just because I didn't know what other 2 blues I wanted at the time. I figured out what 2 blues I wanted, so I took out 2 blue Minnowisms. So your Belittle is just going to be reoccurring that 1 Minnowism. You only need the 1. You're never playing the blue Minnowism. So very, very good. Have used it almost every single game I've tested Fai. Very, very good. You need it. You're running 17 blues. You need Belittle. It's just a thing. You can not run it if you want and try to run more blues and get it, but having Belittle just grab you a blue feels good, man, right? The rest of the deck, so a lot of it, I focused on having a good chunk of what I call unconditional go against starters, follow-ups, blades, and finishers, right? And the way I categorize that is your unconditional go against, you want a a good density, because you have to start your turn with that. If you are like, you can start your turn with a Phoenix Flame, yeah, if you absolutely have to, but Engulfing Flame Wave, Mounting Angers, Rising Resentment, Soaring Strike, Spreading Flames, right? So you have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 Draconic openers.
Mm-hmm.
Belittle is an opener, but it's not draconic, so it's good for mask, but not good for if you want to actually Fai.
Right.
If you want to count Phoenix Flames in there too, like if you draw them, like that's fine. You can add the 2 that are still in your deck if they're still in your deck, right? So those are your openers, and I wanted to have a good density of those. It's a pretty good density. There's not very many turns where I didn't open with something that didn't have unconditional go again. The
Mm-hmm.
second part of the deck is the essentially the seconds, right? So Blaze Headlong, Flame Call, and Flame cards that have go again, but you need to
Right.
play some and an effect, but you need to play something before to like fully utilize the card. So Flame Calls your tutor, and Flame gets it from grave. Blaze 0 for 4, it's great. So if we scroll down here, we have other cards like Phoenix Form, which kind of serve multiple roles. Like you can, it'll gain go again if you start with a Phoenix Flame, and if you get lucky and get 2 or 3, it can be a 0 for 5 go again. It can be a 0 for 5 draw 3 on hit. I haven't done that yet, but in the later game, I can see it possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the essentially, I call them. It's not so before the ruptures. Essentially, is the sword slash increasing
Fillers.
the overall damage. Yeah, it's kind of like you're sharpening your. It's kind of like Razor Reflex, honestly. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're sharpening your blade here. You're adding additional power in your chain. Razor Reflex is super super good. I have one. I mean, you can not like it. That's fine. I have won games off of it. I
Yeah.
have increased combos with it. I've made mask hit with it. I've made other things hit with it
Mm-hmm.
and gone off for some crazy damage. It's just a good card. I just love it. I run Tunic off it. It's great.
Yeah.
Rise from the Ashes MVP. You need 6 of these in my opinion. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know any draconic base deck that can't run 6 of these. It's just such a good card. Even the blue one is not that bad. Being able to get your flame, especially if you're on 2 flames or more, like if you're at
Yeah.
that point in the game, you're doing super well for yourself on Phoenix. Rise for the Ashes. Spreading Flames, very very good for like immediate value. I think the blue count at 17 is okay. I think you could use a couple more blues if things like Iyslander, Oldhim, Lex, Ice Lexi become very rampant in the meta. I think more blues might be necessary, maybe 20 blues. I'm not sure at the moment. I do have cards like Uprising, which is one of those I only have 2 of. Just it's a 0 for 4 off 4 attacks, right? I have every time I've played it, I think I've pretty easily got though that +4. It's not as hard as you would think. So I have that in the main also,
Mm-hmm.
but I could kind of see that going into the side depending on the matchup.
Right.
And that's essentially the main board. There are slots, probably 4 or 5 slots that you can shove in immediately from. I think there's 2 slots actually immediately from the side, and
Mm-hmm.
then everything else you're replacing cards from the main core. Erase face is strictly for erasing people's face,
Yeah.
and what
Enough
that
said.
means is enough said. It's good into Prism. The thing is, like, I don't know if this is needed into Prism or Dromai. I don't think you need to pop your stuff. I think you could just race.
Yeah.
However, I think having this in the deck instead of like something you don't particularly need in that matchup is still pretty good. I'm not particularly sure if I need
Yeah.
poppers or not. I have them in there for now in the V2. It still needs more testing, of course. The 3 Artivores, um, it's a very very good card, and most likely to get to the 60, because this is at 58 right now. To get to the 60, I will put in 2 Artivores in general. Um, reason for that, again, you run Tunic, you can get off the Tunic. Uh, the +1, like I've hit +5 off this card. I've hit
Yeah.
+6 off this card. Like there are some games that we played that I this and Stubbies added like
Mm-hmm.
a bajillion damage here. It's just,
Oh
just
yeah.
very very good.
Yeah.
Really really like it. Rise Up. Um, I'm still super unsure about this card. It's just like I haven't played a lot of testing into like control and mid range, is where I thought it would be good. Um, because if like in the late game when you get the Phoenix Flames and you're hitting for 9 dominate, maybe it's good.
Yeah. It's like,
I'm
do
honestly
you
super
need the
mixed about this.
finisher, or are you looking for more like consistent damage turn to
I
turn?
think I think those Rise Ups might end up being blues, like blue cards, just to
Mm,
like increase the curve or something.
right.
I'm really like very lukewarm about that card at the moment.
Mm,
2 Tome of Firebrands. Um, they are played into mid range control. You cannot play them in the aggro mirror. They do not block. You don't want a card that doesn't block
yep.
unless you app like Phoenix Flame is a bit different, but Tome of Firebrand doesn't block. You
Yep.
don't like it's a good card. I just don't want to run it into like the mirror or Briar. Breaking Point is strictly in decide because like if you face like Oldhim or Iyslander where they don't use their arsenal or they get the arsenal out before it does everything,
Right.
it's in the side. I think it's good in the aggro mirrors. It's very very good forcing like they can't if they're not blocking. It's CNC.
Yeah. It becomes more than just a slap fest, right? You're making them
Exactly.
do something about it. It's just like CNC.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not expecting them to be running D reacts, so like I don't really care about them not being able to play D reacts on the chain. And 5 is still a lot, especially if you have Artivore, you make it 6.
Yeah.
You can have if you're late enough in the chain, doesn't usually happen, but Spreading Flames can actually do something if you're
Right.
late enough in the chain. Because if you're on chain, if
It
this
has
is
to
your
be
chain 6,
right?
but on multiple Phoenix Flames, that's possible.
Yeah.
Like Searing
We've seen
Everblade,
it a
2
few
Phoenix
times.
Flames, that's 3.
We've seen
Yeah.
people with their board just kind of full horizontal, just stuff
Yep.
that they
And you
played.
run Tomes and Artivore,
Mhm.
and you run this card. Like it's definitely possible. It's not as likely, but that's the other card in the sideboard. That's the deck.
Okay.
I like it. I don't love it. So
Mhm.
I think Shuko, Flame Scale, and Mask is 6 armor front, which I love. That's CNC right there. If you need it for
Yep.
CNC. As far as disruption goes, my issue is mainly like the damage ceiling is high, but it's not unfair. Does that sound weird that I have to like compare to like unfairness of like Rosetta Thorn and stuff like that,
I mean,
which is like a 1-for-4 on a stick?
you should
But
compare to that because if there's
that's the
something
meta.
strictly better, then why play this deck if they're just strictly
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah, and it's a matter of like this is a very fun deck. I have to admit, this is a very very fun deck. It can get frustrating. Some of the hands I've been drawing with this deck, even with the ratios being correct, are just downright like why, right?
Yeah.
This deck doesn't block that well. I do like the explosiveness off Stubby's Art of War Tome turns, stuff like that.
Yeah, you can really
very
just
very
go
good
off.
explosiveness. You really can, and you get the draw of Mask against dragons or allies and stuff like that. You get the free hit off the Mask if you hit a dragon. Like
That's
it's
right.
very good.
Because on hits still trigger. So on your third
on
attack,
hits trigger. Unless it says you have to hit their hero or do damage to their hero, you could use their dragons as a proxy and get your on hit through that, right?
Yep. Because they can't block
quite
the
nice.
dragons. They can't save the dragons.
Yeah. As far as this being a premier or the premier aggro deck, maybe, probably.
Are there
Is
decks
this
that
better
you
than
think are better? Yeah, sorry, I guess you're about to mention it.
So
Yeah.
we look through. We have like Katsu. That's this guy's replacing. Is this better than Katsu? I think so. I think it is better than Katsu. I think Katsu got a bit side graded. We'll save this for like a different like spark to your genius discussion. But I think Katsu got take the tempo, double strike, yeah, all this kind of stuff. Got Shuko too. I think Fai's just better, more explosive. But like Katsu wasn't really a threat in the meta.
Aggro decks that are
Briar.
meta.
It's really Briar, right?
Yeah.
Because Chain is out of the meta, Starvo's out of the meta. Chain would have been your like biggest aggro competitor, but Chain's gone. There's like Runeblade, stuff like that like aggro Viscerai.
Which
that
was
kind of
a thing, I guess.
It was definitely a thing. It got a bit like dumpstered by like Starvo and stuff like that, but it's definitely still a thing. I think it could rise up again. It's not as sexy without Skeletor, but it's still there.
Yep.
But I think Briar is really the premier aggro deck at the moment. And I think it has a good matchup into Briar. By good, I mean it doesn't get dumpstered. Like if Briar doesn't sack the Holy Hell, you can win. I think if Briar does sack the Holy Hell, you're gonna get shit on. Like I think not.
No deck can compete against a Saki Briar.
A Saki Briar that draws off E strikes, snatch, gets your quickens. It's disgusting. Yeah. And that's the level I'm thinking about. I don't think the deck in this format, until it's tuned, can't consistently win against Briar if the Briar is very good and practiced. That being said, I think the deck has potential. I really like the deck. I just think it definitely needs more tuning, and we definitely need to see where the meta is to figure out a sideboard and figure out those like maybe 8 to 10 cards that I'm either unsure of or still need more testing. But I think the core 40-50 cards is good. So I think it's just a matter of like increasing the base, but
in the draconic variant of the deck, because as you mentioned, there is.
Don't ask me about Rupture. I'm not even running like Lava Burst in this one. I took it out, right. But there is definitely room to grow here. So that is it for the deck techs. If you did like the content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you like the collaboration, let us know. I mean, we're always looking to do more collaborations with channels for different kind of content to bring like the best of both to our viewers and their viewers, and soon to be
Yeah.
both of our viewers. And with that, hope you enjoyed the content from wherever you are watching in the world. Have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.